Story 1. The Cabin in the Woods. Emma, Jake, Lily, and Mark had been friends since college. They decided to take a break from their hectic lives and planned a much-needed vacation. They rented a cabin deep in the woods, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. The cabin was picturesque, surrounded by tall trees and a serene lake. It seemed like the perfect place to relax and reconnect. The group arrived at the cabin on a bright, sunny afternoon. The air was fresh, and the only sounds were the chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. They unpacked their bags and settled into their rooms, eager to start their vacation. That evening, they lit a bonfire, roasted marshmallows, and shared stories and laughter. The first night went smoothly, but things started to take a strange turn the next day. Emma woke up to find scratches on her arm, as if something had clawed her in her sleep. She brushed it off, thinking she might have scratched herself unconsciously. However, the unease in her stomach lingered. As the day progressed, the friends explored the woods and enjoyed various outdoor activities. They swam in the lake, went hiking, and took plenty of photos. Despite the fun, a sense of dread seemed to hang in the air, unnoticed by the group. That night, strange noises echoed through the cabin. The sound of footsteps and whispers could be heard, but whenever someone checked, they found nothing. Lily was the first to voice her concerns, but the others dismissed it as the wind or animals in the woods. The following night, the situation escalated. Emma woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of heavy breathing next to her bed. She froze, her heart pounding. When she turned on the light, there was nothing there. She tried to calm herself, convincing herself it was just a nightmare. The next morning, the group noticed that the food they had left on the kitchen counter was disturbed. It looked like someone had gone through their supplies, but the door was still locked, and there were no signs of forced entry. Mark suggested they check the cabin for any signs of intrusion. They searched every nook and cranny but found nothing unusual. However, the sense of being watched grew stronger with each passing hour. One evening, while sitting around the bonfire, Jake decided to share a local legend he had read about. According to the legend, the cabin was built on cursed land. Years ago, a family had lived there, and one by one, they had all met tragic and mysterious deaths. Their spirits were said to haunt the cabin, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to disturb their resting place. The story sent shivers down everyone's spine. They laughed it off nervously, but deep down, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. That night, the haunting became undeniable. The friends heard screams and cries coming from the woods. Shadows moved outside the windows, and the temperature in the cabin dropped drastically. The friends huddled together in fear, unable to sleep. The next morning, they decided to cut their vacation short and leave the cabin. However, when they tried to start their car, it wouldn't budge. The engine was dead, and their phones had no signal. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. Determined to find a way out, they decided to hike back to the main road, hoping to find help. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the sense of dread intensified. They felt as if they were being followed, but whenever they turned around, there was nothing there. Hours passed, and they found themselves lost. The woods seemed to stretch endlessly, and the path they thought they were following had disappeared. Exhausted and terrified, they decided to camp out for the night and continue their search in the morning. That night, the terror reached its peak. The friends were awakened by the sound of a woman crying. The noise was coming from all directions, growing louder and more anguished. Shadows danced around their campsite, and a thick fog enveloped them. Emma screamed as she saw a figure emerging from the fog. It was a woman, her face twisted in a grotesque expression of rage and sorrow. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth opened in a silent scream. The friends backed away, but the figure kept advancing. Mark tried to reason with the spirit, begging for their lives. The woman stopped, her expression changing to one of sorrow. She pointed towards the cabin, and in a voice that seemed to come from all around them, she whispered, "Leave now, or suffer our fate." Desperate to escape, the friends ran back to the cabin. They frantically packed their belongings and tried the car again. This time, the engine roared to life, and they sped away from the cursed place. As they drove away, they noticed something in the rearview mirror. The cabin was burning, engulfed in flames. They didn't stop to look back and kept driving until they reached the nearest town. Once they were safe, they reported their experience to the authorities. An investigation revealed the tragic history of the cabin and the deaths of the family that once lived there. The cabin had indeed been built on cursed land, and anyone who stayed there was doomed to encounter the vengeful spirits. Emma, Jake, Lily, and Mark never spoke of the incident again. They returned to their normal lives, but the memories of that terrifying vacation haunted them. They couldn't forget the woman's hollow eyes and the feeling of being watched. Years later, the friends drifted apart, unable to shake the fear that had bonded them together. They knew that the cabin in the woods would forever remain a dark chapter in their lives, a reminder that some vacations can turn into the worst nightmares imaginable. Story 2. The Island of Shadows. Sarah, Matt, Rachel, and Tom had been planning their dream vacation for years. They finally booked an exotic trip to an island paradise off the coast of South America. The island, known as Isla Sombria, was said to be uninhabited and offered pristine beaches, lush jungles, and clear blue waters. It was the perfect escape from their busy lives. The group arrived at Isla Sombria on a small boat, greeted by the sight of paradise. They set up camp on the beach, enchanted by the island's beauty. The sun was shining, the waves were gently lapping at the shore, and everything seemed perfect. Little did they know, their dream vacation was about to become a living nightmare. On their first night, while exploring the island, they stumbled upon an old, weathered sign hidden in the dense foliage. It was written in Spanish, and Rachel, who was fluent in the language, translated it for the group. The sign warned visitors to leave the island before nightfall, as it was cursed and home to malevolent spirits. The group laughed it off, assuming it was a relic from an old legend meant to scare people away. They continued their exploration, finding an abandoned village deeper in the jungle. The village was eerily quiet, with dilapidated huts and overgrown paths. It looked as if it had been deserted for decades. That night, strange things began to happen. Sarah was the first to notice the shadows. They seemed to move on their own, shifting and growing longer as the night progressed. She tried to ignore it, but the unease gnawed at her. As they sat around the campfire, Matt suddenly stood up, claiming he saw someone watching them from the tree line. The others laughed, thinking he was playing a prank, but the fear in his eyes was genuine. They decided to call it a night and retreated to their tents, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling. In the middle of the night, Tom woke up to the sound of whispers. It was as if someone was right outside his tent, speaking in a language he couldn't understand. He unzipped the tent and peered outside, but saw nothing. The whispers stopped, leaving an eerie silence in their wake. The next day, the group tried to put the strange events behind them and enjoy their vacation. They spent the day snorkeling, sunbathing, and exploring more of the island. However, the sense of dread lingered, and they couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. That evening, while cooking dinner over the campfire, Rachel saw a figure standing at the edge of the jungle. It was a woman, dressed in old, tattered clothing, her face hidden in shadows. Rachel called out to her, but the woman didn't respond. She just stood there, staring. The others turned to see the figure, but as soon as they did, the woman disappeared into thin air. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone on the island. They decided to stick together for the rest of the night, unwilling to risk being separated. Determined to find out what was happening, Matt suggested they investigate the abandoned village. Maybe they could find some clues about the island's history. The group agreed, and the next morning, they ventured back into the jungle. In one of the huts, they found a dusty old journal. It belonged to a man named Javier, who had been part of a small community that once thrived on the island. The journal detailed a series of tragedies that had befallen the village: diseases, disappearances, and mysterious deaths. Javier wrote about strange occurrences and how the villagers believed the island was cursed. As they read the journal, they realized the warnings were real. The island was haunted by the spirits of those who had died there, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to disturb their rest. Fear gripped the group as they hurried back to their camp. They decided to leave the island immediately, but when they reached the beach, they found their boat had been destroyed. It was as if something, or someone, wanted to trap them there. Desperation set in as they tried to find another way off the island. They built a makeshift raft, hoping it would be sturdy enough to get them to the mainland. As night fell, the island's malevolent spirits grew more aggressive. The shadows moved with a life of their own, and ghostly figures appeared, their faces twisted in anger and sorrow. The friends huddled together, trying to fend off the apparitions, but it was futile. The spirits' wails filled the air, growing louder and more tormenting. The group made one last attempt to escape at dawn. They pushed the raft into the water, but as they did, the spirits launched their final assault. The air grew cold, and the sea became turbulent. Ghostly hands reached out from the water, trying to pull them back. Sarah, Matt, Rachel, and Tom fought desperately, paddling with all their strength. The spirits' cries echoed around them, filling their minds with terror. Just as they thought they might escape, a massive wave capsized the raft, plunging them into the icy depths. Sarah struggled to the surface, gasping for air. She saw her friends around her, equally terrified. They clung to the remnants of the raft, praying they could hold on until they were rescued. Hours later, a fishing boat found them and brought them back to safety. Exhausted and traumatized, they recounted their harrowing ordeal to the authorities. An investigation confirmed the island's dark history, but no one could explain the supernatural events. Sarah, Matt, Rachel, and Tom never returned to Isla Sombria. The island remained a forbidden place, shrouded in mystery and fear. They tried to move on with their lives, but the memories of the haunting vacation lingered. Each of them was haunted by the shadows and the faces of the spirits. They could never forget the terror they experienced on the Island of Shadows, a place where the dead did not rest, and nightmares became reality. Story 3: The Haunted Resort. A group of 6 friends, Megan, Ryan, Jenna, Chris, Sophie, and Daniel, decided to take a luxurious vacation at a remote resort in the mountains. The resort, called Shadow Peak, was advertised as a serene and exclusive getaway, promising breathtaking views and unparalleled tranquility. The friends arrived at Shadow Peak on a crisp autumn afternoon. The resort was beautiful, with its grand rustic lodge and cozy cabins scattered around the property. The staff welcomed them warmly and showed them to their rooms. That evening, they gathered in the main lodge for a gourmet dinner, excited about the week ahead. From the first night, Megan felt a strange unease. The resort was too quiet, and there seemed to be an odd tension in the air. She brushed it off as nerves from the long trip, but the feeling persisted. The next day, the group explored the surrounding forest, hiking through trails that led to stunning viewpoints. As they walked, they noticed old, crumbling statues and remnants of buildings hidden among the trees. Ryan, curious about the history, asked one of the resort staff about them. The staff member, an older woman named Eliza, hesitated before explaining that the resort was built on the site of an old sanatorium. The sanatorium had closed down decades ago under mysterious circumstances, and the land had been abandoned until the resort was built. That night, strange occurrences began. Megan woke up to the sound of soft crying. She got up and followed the sound to the hallway, where she saw a shadowy figure standing at the end, shrouded in darkness. She froze, fear gripping her heart. The figure slowly turned and vanished into thin air. Terrified, Megan ran back to her room and told Jenna about what she had seen. Jenna tried to reassure her, suggesting it was a bad dream. But the next morning, Ryan mentioned hearing footsteps outside his window during the night. The group exchanged uneasy glances, realizing something was amiss. Over the next few days, the supernatural events escalated. The friends heard disembodied voices whispering their names, and objects moved on their own. Doors slammed shut, and cold spots appeared in random places. Sophie found handprints on the bathroom mirror, as if someone had pressed their hands against the glass from the other side. The worst incident happened one night when Chris was violently pulled from his bed by an unseen force. He screamed for help, and the others rushed in to find him thrashing on the floor, covered in scratches and bruises. They managed to calm him down, but the terror in his eyes was unmistakable. Desperate to leave, the friends packed their bags and headed to the lobby, only to find the main doors locked. Eliza appeared, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. She admitted that the resort was indeed haunted by the spirits of the sanatorium patients, who had died in agony and despair. She urged them to stay together and not provoke the spirits. Determined to find a way out, the friends searched the resort for any clues. They discovered a hidden basement filled with old medical equipment and patient records. The records detailed horrific experiments conducted on the patients, who were subjected to inhumane treatments and torture. The sanatorium's director, Dr. Heinrich, was a sadistic man who believed in curing mental illness through extreme measures. Many patients died under his care, their souls trapped in the sanatorium's walls. The friends realized that the spirits were not just restless, they were seeking revenge. The spirits became more aggressive as night fell. The friends barricaded themselves in the main lodge, but the haunting continued. Shadows danced on the walls and ghostly figures roamed the halls. The temperature dropped, and a sense of dread filled the air. Megan, feeling a strange connection to the spirits, decided to confront them. She entered the basement alone, hoping to communicate with the trapped souls. As she descended the stairs, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. She turned to see a ghostly figure with hollow eyes staring at her. The spirit of a young girl stepped forward, her face twisted in pain. Megan tried to speak, but the girl raised a finger to her lips, signaling for silence. She pointed to an old journal on a dusty shelf. Megan grabbed it and began to read. The journal belonged to Dr. Heinrich. It detailed his cruel experiments and his eventual descent into madness. In his final entry, he wrote about a ritual to bind the spirits to the sanatorium, ensuring they could never find peace. The ritual could only be broken by burning the journal. Megan ran back to the group, clutching the journal. She explained what she had found and urged them to start a fire. They gathered in the lobby, surrounded by the malevolent spirits, and set the journal ablaze. As the flames consumed the journal, the spirits screamed in anguish. The air grew thick with their cries, and the walls trembled. The friends huddled together, praying for the nightmare to end. Suddenly, a blinding light filled the room. The spirits began to fade, their screams turning into whispers. The temperature rose and the oppressive darkness lifted. The doors to the lobby burst open and the friends ran outside, gasping for breath. They left Shadow Peak behind, never looking back. The resort was closed down and the land was left to nature. The friends tried to move on, but the memories of the haunted resort haunted them. Megan couldn't forget the hollow eyes of the young girl and the cold touch of the spirits. She knew that some places were better left undisturbed and that the past could sometimes reach out from beyond the grave to claim the living. Years later, the friends remained close, bound by the terror they had faced together. They never spoke of the haunted resort, but each of them carried the scars of that horrifying vacation. They had learned that some getaways could turn into nightmares, leaving behind a darkness that could never be fully escaped.